As a late 90s baby, I think I'm starting to experience a rather early midlife crisis. Now, allow me to explain. First, we got to spend 3 years indoors, and now I'm too old to party. France somehow managed to dethrone us as the wildest protesters. My hairline is retreating faster than the global economy, and this guy took all of our jobs. Oh, sorry, wrong picture. This guy. Now, it's been quite a while since I last did one of these. So, to everyone who doesn't know me yet, hi, my name is Claris. I am a software engineer by day at BBD, working mainly in Java. Now, that means I'm a blind programmer because I cannot C sharp. At night, though, I'm a game developer. In other words, I like to learn by playing with technology, and I hope to share some of that excitement with you today. It's hard to believe that at Escape 2019, we were talking about how AI could, potentially revolutionize our industry. And fast forward only 4 years, here we are. AI is a hot topic right now, and it's shrouded in a lot of controversy. An example of one of those is, as you see on the screen, if that does update, there we go. This is Alice and Sparkle, which is a book, or a children's book specifically, that was written and illustrated entirely by artificial intelligence. And this is actually being sold on Amazon, which, as you can imagine, caused quite a lot of friction in the novelist community. Some other crazy things: law firms are starting to utilize AI to help write legal documents. And this actually saves them hundreds of hours, but obviously it still requires a lot of human intervention. But it's a great assistive tool already. Many of us here are developers, and you can all relate. We've been using ChatGPT to help us write snippets of code, which for the most part is just accurate plug and play. However, you do still need to make quite a lot of changes. But it's becoming so accurate, especially with the release of Llama from Meta, that it's starting to make us wonder if we shouldn't be rethinking about how we do technical assessments, because to an extent they're becoming obsolete. And should they not also incorporate the usage of AI, as that's the norm going forward? My global game jam entry this year was actually about 50% AI written. And by using the AI to help me write the grunt code, it actually opened up so much time to focus on other aspects, such as the game design itself. But I think we can all agree that the industry that was hit the hardest is the art industry. What you see here on the screen is all AI generated. And with some fancy prompts, it's becoming possible to generate very specific details as well. And it's actually becoming so intricate that prompt engineering is now evolving into a field of its own. And what used to take artists days on end can now be generated within seconds. Unless, of course, you need hands. I think it's pretty fair for me to assume at this point that everyone in this room is fairly familiar with the topic and have had their eyes on it for a while now. But there's a couple of highlights that I would like to share in the generative AI space. Text to image is a concept that's actually been around since 2015, even though it only became popular recently. But in short, it allows you to provide a prompt, which you describe a scenario with, and then you give it some negative prompts to tell it what to not do and what to avoid, and it will output a picture for you. A line draw was one of the first techniques that came to light. And as you can see, the output is quite blurry. But what was interesting about this is it already started to demonstrate the ability for artificial intelligence to understand unlikely and complicated scenarios. And it could then generate those images based off data that it was trained on around other scenarios. In 2016, there was a breakthrough with something called generative adversarial networks. I don't know what that means, but it's GAN for short. And essentially what this does is it takes a random noise, which it uses to generate a fake image. It's then fed into a discriminator, which is trained on real data and will decide if that image looks fake or not. And it will feed that back into the generator again, and it will loop. It's almost like recursive guessing. And the results were absolute nightmare fuel, but it is already a major improvement over a line draw. But where it really blew up, though, was in October 2022 when Stable Diffusion 1.5 came to the public. And Stable Diffusion 2 dropped as little as 3 months after this initial release. And just to put it into perspective how quickly this field evolved, while I was preparing for this talk, I was going to insert a joke about, and that's also not updating, sorry, hold on. There we go. I was going to insert a joke about how the AI generates text on images that not even a pharmacist can read. But while I was preparing, Stable Diffusion XL was released to the public. And as you can see here, it generates the text pretty good. Just think about all the possibilities in using this in logo designs. As a game developer hobbyist, I naturally looked for ways to use AI in my games. Now, I have little to no artistic ability. That's my own drawing there. And the thought of using AI to generate my art instead really piqued my interest. Did a little bit of digging, and I realized that people are using Midjourney, which you've probably heard of, to generate rather high-quality assets for their games. For the pixel art enthusiasts, there's even a cool project called Retro Diffusion, which lets you specify a color palette and a prompt, and it will generate pixel art for you. The 3D space still needs quite a bit of work, though, but there's a technique called latent point diffusion. And as you can see on the image, essentially it generates these atomic structures. And they're not really usable out of the box, but there are techniques being developed that will convert these into usable meshes. One of the companies making strides in this area is called Cadem, in case you're interested. They basically generate fully optimized 3D meshes from these point clouds. And while I was preparing for this talk, they also released a feature that now introduces automatic texturing. Another field that's seen very drastic changes, though, is the speech generation. Now, even though it's something that's been around for many years, Microsoft SAM and all of those assistants, the development of neural networks have really advanced this section of the industry quite a lot. One of my favorite new techniques is something called retrieval-based voice conversion. And essentially what this does is it allows you as a user to replace an existing voice with a voice of your choice while maintaining both the pitch and the intonation. And what's cool about this is people realize that they can use it to swap out the voices on their favorite songs. I'm about to play you a clip of a song called Girl Like Me by Jasmine, but it's sung by Patrick Starfish instead. So I'm going to play a few seconds of the original so you can get a reference for it, and then the AI-generated version.
See, I made a profile on Tinder, saying you love me to be with. I think that means I'm getting desperate. Wish I could return to sender, but you don't love me no more. Hey. I made a profile on Tinder, said you love me to be well. I think that means I'm getting desperate. Wish I could return to sender, but you don't love me no more.
In case you're interested in playing around with that, I created that clip on a site called voicify.ai. So AI has also recently started to invade our video space with the discovery of techniques such as model scope, which allows text to video generation. There are, however, a lot of flaws to this still. It's quite compute heavy, which means that you're going to get stuck with low frame rates, low resolutions, and it's also quite bad at keeping context. So if you look at the video on the screen, you'll see there are a lot of jump cuts in the video. And that's because any clips longer than 3 seconds, it tends to just turn into meaningless shapes. Speaking about meaningless, here's Elon Musk eating toilets. And this is why it's always a bad idea to give the internet this kind of power. And even though I didn't generate this one specifically, when I played around with this model scope locally, an interesting thing is that you'll see there's a Shutterstock logo on all the videos. I'm assuming it's because it was trained on stock data. So if it hasn't become obvious by now, I'm quite a big fan of SpongeBob, a large part of my childhood. And that's why I was so intrigued earlier this year with the arrival of something called AI Sponge. Just by show of hands, how many people have heard of AI Sponge? That's surprising. Okay, good. That means this will be new to you. So, so basically what it was is it was essentially a AI-generated SpongeBob episode, which was meant to run forever. Now, the reason why I say meant is because it was a big mistake, but they allowed the audience to suggest topics. And it didn't take very long before the characters started to get steamy with each other, resulting in a ban. Unfortunately, it got taken down for good recently, but I haven't quite had my full yet. So I thought to myself, why don't we make one for Escape this year and replicate the same mistake by allowing the audience to suggest topics? What's the worst that could happen? So I set off on a journey to create my own, and let's briefly talk about how it works. We're going to need to combine the power of a few different AIs to accomplish this effect. The first one we're looking for is a generative AI that can help us write a script for our scenario, and we're going to be using ChatGPT for that. It's quite simple to use. In our case of the API, we just pass it a prompt, and we also give it a model for generation, which in our case would be GPT 3.5, because it's fast and cheap, but most importantly, it's censored. The prompt will look something as follows. I hope you can read on the screen. Generate a comedy conversation between SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward, no longer than a minute. It needs to be formatted as follows, and then you'll have the name followed by the dialogue. The topic is, and then we will insert your topics there. Something to note is on the script that it spews out, you'll see sometimes there's these weird descriptors such as they all laugh together, which isn't necessarily spoken by a character. So we have to keep that in mind and actually take that out when processing this. In order to generate the voices, I was going to make use of a website called UberDuck, which is text-to-voice generation. And I had the demo built out and everything, and a month before Escape, boom, it went down. Turns out that there was a dispute with the creators of those voices, and they had to take all of them down, leaving just the boring ones. But luckily, there was a substitute. This is a site called FakeU. Now, unfortunately, this one is rate limited on the API, which means that the response times fluctuate, and it's a bit frustrating in a live demo. So we're going to give it a head start today. But in order to test it out, I thought I'd ask ChatGPT to write us a rap about our CEO, and then have the one and only Slim Shady perform that rap.
Kevin Staples on the tech throne, no debate, innovate, elevate, no time to hesitate. I'm running through his veins, genius in his mind. See you grind, changing the game, one line at a time.
So here comes a bit of the boring part, so bear with me. In terms of storing data, I've decided to make use of MongoDB. Now we want to split it into two databases. One which we're going to be using to store all the topics that you're suggesting, and then also a database that's going to be storing all of the fully generated topics. The reason why we split this is because it means we can take in all the topics, randomly pick and choose, but only generate one at a time so that we don't completely hammer the APIs. For the visualization part of it, we're going to be playing it out in Unity, which lets us import our character models, assign them animations, make them walk around, and then play out their voice lines. And then also, we need a way for the audience to interact by suggesting their topics. My initial thoughts was using Twitter, or as it's now called, X. Ran out of creativity there. That's $44 billion well spent. In order to read these tweets, however, we need streams, which is no longer available in the free tier of the API. So I thought, let's quickly buy a month subscription. And turns out that Elon Musk is trying very hard to recuperate that $44 billion. So instead, let's use Discord and build a bot. The project is essentially just split into three simple components. The director, which is our node backend that basically orchestrates everything. So this will take a topic, it'll then generate a script around that topic, and then pass it through to the voice generation, store that all back in the database. We also have the Discord bot, which is built in Node.js as well, which will let you suggest your topics. And then lastly, like we mentioned, the Unity client, which will call your director and retrieve those generated scenarios. Now, in a moment, I'm going to ask the audience to start suggesting topics so you can get a little bit of a head start. But let me first explain how it's going to work. First thing to note, your Discord username will be named and shamed on the screen. So try and keep things professional, but also fun at the same time. After all, as humans, we somehow managed to resurrect Michael Jackson from the dead, but we can't figure out how to censor chatbots. Shout out to Microsoft, eh? So to avoid confusing the AI, and just for the best kind of results and the most fun ones, try to keep the following 3 things in mind. By the way, the QR code will come up shortly. ChatGPT doesn't have context of specifics. So in other words, if your topic is revolving around escape, be sure to be descriptive about it and say the tech conference called Escape, because ChatGPT won't know what it is by default. Keep in mind that the available characters who can deliver the dialogue is SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward. So your conversation can revolve around other characters, but try and include those 3 as your primary speakers. And then also try something outlandish. For example, one of my favorites is saying like Squidward and Patrick have a 1-line rap battle, while SpongeBob shouts, "Yeah, fam," after every line. So the QR code is supposed to be up on the screen. There we go. Cool. So if you've got Discord on your phone, you can scan that. Just by show of hands, how many people have Discord on their phone? On their phones. Okay, cool. That's quite a few people. What we will do is we'll check in shortly. If we don't have enough topics, I'll just take some manual input from the audience and we will throw it in there. So when you scan that QR code, it's going to take you to the Discord channel where you'll see the little topics thread. You just post !topic, as you can see on the bottom of the screen there, and then the topic Squidward can't stop telling dad jokes or whatever you want to insert in there. I'm going to leave that QR code up on the side while we run through some of the code. So firstly of all, I got to apologize to the JavaScript community. Let's just wait for that to reflect. This is my first time using Express, and it's quite a rushed job. So in short, what we're going to be doing is we're going to expose 3 endpoints in our code. We have the obligatory ping pong endpoint just to test if everything works. Also, we have this endpoint here, which is going to allow users to post their topics. This is what's being consumed by the Discord bot as we speak. And then there's also an endpoint which will retrieve the fully generated stories. This is going to be called by Unity later on. There's a cron job that runs, or a scheduled job that runs every 5 seconds. And this will check if no story is currently being generated. It will start working on the next topic. So let's quickly check up on the program, see if our topics are coming through. I'm going to open up Mongo and see we currently have 1 topic. There's also a pre-generated one. There we go. Now we've got 2 topics. And if we jump over to our terminal, we can see that the voice lines are being generated as we speak. Great. All is in order so far. So digging into our code, this is probably the simplest endpoint. This is just the one used by the Discord bot, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this one. It's as simple as just posting the topic into our Mongo collection. And then we also give it a priority. So keep this in mind. I'm going to explain why that's important later. This is more the meat of the system, which is a part that actually generates the story. So this is a function called by that cron job we spoke about. What it does is it checks if a story is already being generated. It's just going to stop, so it doesn't hammer the APIs. And if there's already an available story, it will also stop. However, in this case, I'm letting it generate a few up front. But this is ideal if you're running an actual live stream of this. If you do want a non-stop live stream as well, and the reason why I'm sharing all of this is the source code is going to be fully available and free afterwards, so you can go and make your own. If you want a non-stop live stream, there's also this little function which will generate a topic for you if there are none available from your audience that's watching. This function essentially just auto-generates a topic by calling ChatGPT, and the prompt will look something as follows. So generate a random topic for a community conversation. You can change these as you want in the configuration if you want something more specific. We're then just going to parse that response and store it into the proposed topics. And this is where we give it a priority of -1, and you'll see why shortly. Back to the actual generate story function. We're going to draw our submitted topics from the database, and then we sort it with this function which sorts it by priority. And this is what we spoke about earlier. The reason why we do this is because as your system generates topics and users come online and they start watching your stream, you want to prioritize their topics above the system-generated ones. We're then going to fire off this prompt with the topic to ChatGPT. It's a prompt we spoke about earlier. And then we're going to parse that response. And it's important for us to process this text into an array of sentences, which are essentially split by the character name as well as the dialogue. And then also this function, which will validate all of the characters on the script. So like I said, ChatGPT sometimes spews out a bunch of nonsense. This will cut out all of those characters, and you'll only request voice lines for the ones you accounted for. We then have to request these voice lines one by one. And unfortunately, because of the rate limiting, there's a bit of a failback function that will retry it in case it gets rate limited. Now, these API calls are not synchronous. So when you call the API, it doesn't send back the audio as you need. Instead, it gives you a UID, which you need to poll and see how far the generation is. So after requesting all of them, we're going to poll every 3 seconds just to see how the status of those audio files are. And you saw a little bit of that earlier on the terminal. If they haven't all been completed, we just call the function recursively until we get them, after which we return all of the results. Now, the results that come back once these have been generated is actually URLs to audio files, which are stored in a cloud bucket. We then put everything back together. So in other words, we now have an array of objects which contains these scenarios. Each scenario is comprised of a character, the sentence that they're speaking, as well as a path to the actual audio file. We then insert that topic into the DB and we remove it from the proposed topics so we don't run it again. I'm not going to spend much time on the bot because aside from just initializing all the tokens and so on, it just consumes the endpoint that we exposed earlier. The Unity code consists of a couple of 100 lines to handle the animations, the cameras, and the walking, but I don't want to go through all of that. So instead, let's just chat about the core of the code, which is where we retrieve that scenario. So as you can see, we call the endpoint, which returns our fully generated stories that we did earlier. And you'll also remember that those generated stories contain URLs to the audio files. But thanks to Unity web requests, it's quite simple to download those audio files. So we just run a little loop there, get all the audio files, and then we store them into an array of audio clips. Finally, we call our play scenario function, which essentially will play all the scenes within that scenario, which consists of the character and the dialogue, until the whole scenario basically finishes. The play scene function is also quite simple. It consists of an audio line, setting the subtitles, setting the camera target, so where the camera needs to face, as well as just toggling the relevant animations for the characters. So this was a dangerous live demo to pick. A lot of points of failure, but if all went well, it is the moment everybody has been waiting for, which is demo time. So we're going to do one last checkup and see if we have topics. We do. Great. I'm now going to launch the program and we can sit back and enjoy.
Hey, Patrick, what are you up to today?
Oh, SpongeBob, I'm studying quantum physics.
You studying quantum physics? That's rich.
Yep, I'm an expert in quantum physics.
Quantum? I've never heard of that. Patrick?
It's the study of quarkly particles and their flibberbations.
Flibberbations? That's not even a real word, Patrick.
Of course it is. It's the process by which flibbers interact with patients.
Oh, I'm not sure about that, Patrick. I think you might be making things up. Hey, 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 hey,
So this happens sometimes. That's why I put in an emergency button to skip that. So let the next one play out.
Guys, I've been thinking, what if we're all just cartoons?
Of course we're cartoons, SpongeBob. We're living in an animated world.
Oh, please. This is ridiculous. I have better things to do than entertain your absurdities.
No, Squidward, I mean it. What if everything we do is scripted? What if someone is controlling our every move? Well, that would explain why I always end up doing something silly.
This is all nonsense. We're not cartoons, SpongeBob. We're just figments of some artist's imagination.
So, you're saying we're not real?
What does that mean? I can eat as many Krabby Patties as I want without getting fat.
No, Patrick. It means we're fictional characters created for entertainment. I guess you're right, Squidward. But you know what they say. It's better to be a cartoon than not be a cartoon at all.
Yeah, and we get to have funny-shaped bodies and live in a pineapple.
I can't believe I'm having this conversation. I'm going back to my clarinet.
Well, I'm glad we cleared that up. Guys, now, who's up for a jellyfishing adventure?
Me. I am. Let's go, SpongeBob.
I'll just stay here and enjoy the silence.
Go on, I'm gonna let it play out one more topic, after which we'll shut it down.
Hey, Patrick, have you ever thought about what it would be like if we were rulers of the world?
Oh, absolutely, SpongeBob. We would make everything so much funnier. No more serious stuff.
Oh, please. You two could rule a sandbox, let alone the world.
Oh, Squidward, don't be such a sarpus. Imagine if we had mustaches like Hitler.
Well, and we could walk around with our hands up like this saying.
Oh, I can't believe I'm even hearing this. You two are ridiculous.
But Squidward, imagine everyone laughing and having a good time instead of fighting. We'd have jellyfish parties and Krabby Patty parades.
And instead of marching bands, we could have marching jellyfish. Buzz, buzz, buzz.
This is the most absurd conversation I've ever had the misfortune of being a part of.
Oh, come on. Squidward, lighten up. We're just having a silly imaginary conversation.
Yeah, Squidward, don't be such a grumpy gills. Let's focus on spreading laughter, not war.
I can't believe I'm saying this. But maybe you have a point. Laughter is a lot better than hot.
See, Squidward, we're onto something.
Yeah, well, domination through company and jellyfish dancing.
Oh, what have I gotten myself into?
Cool, let us shut that down before it becomes self-aware. Fantastic. Thank you to everyone for suggesting those topics. That played out perfectly. But as of everything, as you saw, there's a lot that can go wrong. So the scenario we had to skip because of the whole spasm there. While I was preparing, there were actually two hilarious scenarios that I wanted to share with you. And the first was that I was asking you to generate, the rap battle we spoke about earlier. And for some reason in between, SpongeBob decided that it's a good idea to beatbox. And this was my personal favorite. I think this is the one time that SpongeBob actually became self-aware that he is trapped in an AI and started screaming for help.
You both rock it. Hey, what has that? Thank you.
Well, now that the fun is over, let's talk about ethics and morality. I think there's a lot of strange usages of AI nowadays, and some are hilarious and funny, like the Pope indulging in modern fashion. But there's also quite a few that can be quite harmful. This image actually convinced the internet for a good while that Elon was dating Mary Barra, who is a married woman. Now, can you imagine the damage that you could do to some people's public images? Not to Elon, his image is already damaged. But at the same time, while things can be harmful, it can also be used for good. And the use of machine learning in the health industry in particular is a point that I think is important. And there's already a lot of studies showing the potential of us using AI in screening and detecting cancer early. There's even a model called Pyro, that's with a 0 at the end, being trained on pandemic data. And the cool thing about this is in the future, it can help us predict and prepare for upcoming pandemics and viruses. But note that all of these examples is something that still requires human intervention. And I'll explain why I stress that a little later. But at this point, you're probably wondering to yourself, why? Why did we make an AI SpongeBob? Why all these AI-related things? Well, because we can. But also, there's something important that I want to share with you today. I think it's no surprise that there's a lot of panic within our industry with regards to job safety, and rightfully so. And I'm also not here to sugarcoat things and tell you not to worry, because the reality is that everything that we are comfortable with now and that what we were comfortable with last year has been shaken up completely. However, I would like to change your perspective on the impact that this revolution is having on our industry. Think back to the Industrial Revolution again, as we heard in the keynote today. The introduction of electricity, machinery, it did replace a lot of manual labor jobs. That's a reality. But at the same time, it also opened up an entire new economy to those that were willing to evolve alongside those changes. Machine operators, electricians, diesel mechanics, car mechanics, those were all roles that didn't exist prior to the revolutions where those technologies were invented. Let's make it a bit more personal. The invention of personal computers and the internet, it also scared society in the same way. And the reality is that it did affect a lot of existing jobs. However, here we are all seated today, reaping the benefits of the new economy that was created by this revolution. This is just another one of those revolutions. And in the same way that the previous generation is scared or was scared, so are we today. But instead of cowering in fear and falling behind, which might result in us becoming irrelevant, let's rather be excited about this. And oh, my slides are gone. Let's rather be excited about it as we actively grow with this change in our space. Would you like me to pause briefly just to get that back up? Okay, cool. Let's take a break. I would have suggested putting on another episode, but clearly that wouldn't work either. Otherwise, I can finish this one without the slides. Okay, there we go. Are we back? Yes. Okay, great. If there's anything that I want you to take away from this talk today, it's that go home and play with the tools that are available to you. And it doesn't have to be boring. You can make something fun, make something cool. Make an AI-generated podcast, make a ChatGPT-powered home assistant, or even one of the trends I've seen recently is text adventure games powered by AI. Because the thing is, AI is very powerful, but it's even more powerful in the hands of those who know how to utilize its strength. I like to compare AI to power tools. It's an assistive tool that's meant to increase human productivity by tens, if not hundreds of times. And in the same way that the power tools still require operators even after decades, AI still requires human intervention because, after all, AI is not sentient for now. AI is something that merely amplifies our ability as humans. And if anything, we should be fearing ourselves more than the next Skynet. So as we learn to tap into these superpowers, let's be the ones to use AI responsibly for the better of humanity. And that's a wrap. I had to wait for now. Thank you.